there are 2 million viewers who clicked on this video. Now let me ask you a question. Is there anyone in your house right now? No. Then what sound can you hear? Silence? Can you still hear anything? Well, how about knocking? If you heard knocking, then you'd probably think there's someone at the door, right? However, for the woman in today's story, she lives alone, so she shouldn't have heard any knocking. So why did she hear it? Let's watch until the end to find out. In the dark room, a young woman was sitting on the edge of her bed, hugging her knees. Her face was pale and she was shaking. On the other side of the room, there was a big full-length mirror, and the woman kept glancing at her reflection. She seemed to be frightened by something behind her. In fact, she was frightened of something she had seen in the mirror. Right now, she really wanted to leave that room, but she just couldn't bring herself to do it. It all started when she was hanging up some clothes in her closet. Suddenly, she saw a very scary figure standing behind her. She turned around quickly, but there was no one there. She thought maybe she just needed a good explanation. After all, she lives alone and she hasn't seen anyone enter her home. She told herself it must have been a dream or something. But after what she saw next, she knew it wasn't a dream. When she walked into the bathroom, she saw a very strange scene. All of the towels were hanging from the shower head, and they were arranged in a line like little coffins. This meant only one thing. Someone was in her house, and that's when she heard the knocking. The knocking came again, but this time it sounded much louder. It was as if someone was scratching their fingernail against the glass. Just thinking about it made her blood run cold, so she hurried back to her bedroom and locked herself in. As she looked out the window, she could see everything was fine outside. There were no trees or shrubs near the window, nor were there any other houses close enough to where she could have climbed through. Even if someone had somehow managed to get inside, the front door was locked and bolted from the inside. Plus, she hadn't heard anyone break in. So how could someone be in her house? But that's not all. When she went to check, she found that all of the doors were locked from the outside. She started to panic. How could someone lock all of the doors from the outside if they didn't have a key? Just then, the knocking sound came again, but this time it seemed to be coming from inside the room. She was shocked because she lived alone. She had never invited anyone over, and she was sure she had locked all the windows and doors. So how could anyone be in her room? As she stood there, frozen in fear, suddenly she saw something moving in the corner of the room. It was a shadow, and it seemed to be getting closer and closer. She took a few steps back, but it kept advancing toward her. The woman didn't know what to do. Was she going crazy? What would happen when that shadow reached her? That's when she noticed the floorboards creaking under the weight of whatever was approaching. And that's when she saw something horrible was crawling toward her, dragging itself across the floorboards. It looked like a giant spider, except it had a human face and long, sharp claws. Each time it dragged itself forward, the woman cried out in terror, wishing she could escape, but she was too paralyzed with fear to make a move. However, the creature didn't seem to want to eat her. Instead, it kept inching closer and closer to the mirror behind her. It looked like it was trying to see its own reflection. She finally broke free of her paralysis and ran to the window. She pounded on the glass, screaming for help, but no one could hear her cries. She was completely alone. When she turned back around, the monster was gone, and that's when she saw a note lying on the floor. On it was written, "I'm sorry, but we need your body." And she saw the creature again in the mirror. It was smiling at her. The monster opened its mouth wide, revealing rows upon rows of sharp teeth. The last thing she saw before everything went black was its long, sticky tongue lapping at its lips. After hearing the woman's screams, a neighbor called the police, and they broke down the door. But no one was inside. They searched everywhere, but they also found nothing. Was it all just a figment of the woman's imagination? Did she really see a monster, or was she just having a nightmare? The next morning, some officers were called to the scene, and they began their investigation. One of them entered the room and found the note. He immediately realized that it was written in pencil. He took it out and read it again. "I'm sorry, but we need your body." He showed it to his partner, who frowned deeply. It was clear that the woman in the house wasn't lying. Someone had broken in and taken her away during the night. They searched the entire house and found more pencils and papers. The papers had similar messages written on them. The police felt a sense of urgency and were determined to find the woman alive. They checked nearby hospitals, but unfortunately, no one had brought her there. They even contacted mental hospitals, but no one had admitted her. At this point, they didn't know whether to classify this case as a murder, an abduction, or something else. Just when they were about to give up, one of the officers found a piece of clothing on the bed. It was a sock, and it appeared to be brand new. He put it on his hand, turned it inside out, and looked closely at it. Sure enough, he found a small brand that said Happy Feet. The officer remembered seeing the same brand at a department store 2 days ago. He quickly reported this to his colleagues, and soon they were on their way to the store. When they arrived, they spoke to the staff and found out which particular salesperson had been working 2 days ago. They asked if he remembered selling a pair of socks to a man. He recalled doing so and confirmed that the customer had bought the socks along with some other items. With this new lead, the police felt confident they would catch up to the kidnapper. At the same time, the woman had regained consciousness. She was tied up on a chair in a dark room. Suddenly, she heard footsteps approaching. A man entered the room, carrying a glass of water. He was tall and muscular, and had a strange symbol tattooed on his arm. He poured water on her, saying, "Drink up." He seemed impatient and kept looking at his watch. The police tracked the kidnapper to a warehouse district on the outskirts of town. They carefully approached one of the buildings, but when they tried to open the door, it wouldn't budge. They called for backup, and soon a loud crash echoed through the area as the police finally broke down the door. Meanwhile, the woman in the room screamed for help, hoping someone would come to her rescue. Unfortunately, no one could hear her, but that's when the tattooed man left the room. He had heard the commotion outside and was worried the police might be there. That's when the woman seized her chance. She struggled to free herself from the ropes, and when she finally managed to do so, she quietly left the room. She didn't know where to go, but she hoped she could escape. She could hear the police shouting and moving things around, but she couldn't bring herself to go outside. She was too afraid she'd be caught by the kidnapper. Suddenly, she heard a gunshot. Immediately after, the sound of police sirens filled the air. She knew she had to do something quickly. She hid in a corner and stayed perfectly still, hoping the police wouldn't see her. Minutes passed, and eventually the sounds of police activity faded away. When she finally gathered enough courage to peek out, she saw a police officer walking toward her. He was examining the floor. She wanted to call out, but she was afraid he might think she was the woman who had been kidnapped. She was so scared she even froze when the officer got closer. He suddenly looked up and their eyes met. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly, still too afraid to speak. "Do you know what happened here?" he continued. She shook her head slightly. Just then, another officer entered the room and noticed her. "Oh, you're one of the people who live here," he said. "We've already checked everyone's ID. Nothing happened to the lady who lived here." She finally relaxed, feeling the tension leaving her body. The officer smiled reassuringly. "It's all over now," he said. "You can go back to your room. We'll take care of everything else." Relief washed over her, and she thanked them. She returned to her room and closed the door behind her. But as she leaned against the door, she heard a voice. "It's not over yet," She froze and slowly turned around. Standing in the corner was the man with the tattoo. He was smiling wickedly, and his eyes gleamed with excitement. "You're mine now," he said, lunging toward her. She screamed, but no one could hear her. The room was empty. She was truly alone, and as the darkness enveloped her, she knew it was just a matter of time before the monster claimed her body.